Hello, my name is Mark Sommerfeld. Welcome to my shop. Today we're going to be demonstrating our new little junior raised panel set. You can do a lot of things with this little set. We even have plans for some of these things. This little desktop series we have here is a little envelope holder right here. We have a pencil holder and a paper tray. That's been very popular. We also have plans for this little baby grandfather clock that stands about 3 foot high. You can see where we incorporate all the raised panels and all the ends here in the front and the back and so forth. Also, I think our most popular item has been this little doll cradle, and you can see where we got the raised panels on the ends and on the sides. And it's very unique. You can do a lot of things with this, and what's nice about it, you can use some exotic woods in some of this stuff because you're not using very much stock. In fact is, when I was building cabinets, I think I could have built some of this stuff here just out of my scrap barrel. So it's a very useful little tool. And today what we're going to do is we're going to start and we're going to build this doll cradle, and I'll show you how we can do that using this set. Okay, to get started building this cradle, we have a set of plans that's going to help you a lot, and these plans feature full-size drawings to cut out all the shapes and pieces you need. We also have available a series of templates here for all the curves, and that will help a lot too. The first thing we're going to do when we start building this is we're going to build the two side panels here first, which feature two raised panels. And the first thing we're going to do is cut the copes on the ends of these two rails here, and also we're going to cut a cope on the top of this little middle stile and the bottom of this little middle stile. And this is the bit we're going to be using, our cope cutter. So what we're going to do is stick this into our router and get started. Okay, here's our cope cutter. We're going to stick that into our router and snug it up. Our left hand goes in and pushes in the spindle lock. Our bent wrench tightens it up. And we're going to take our insert ring, stick it on here, and we're ready to set the height. Now, in getting the thickness of your stock, you can use any thickness of stock you want, usually from about 1/2 inch up to 5/8. I usually like to go about right in the middle, which is around 9/16. That's what I milled this stock to. Now, in setting the height, again, there's no set dimension. What I like to do is when I set mine on the back here, I want about 1/8 of an inch right in here at least. All right, so now what we're going to do is set this up to this stock that I had. You can see I got to raise my bit just a little bit here. All right, about there. We got her set. Now we're going to leave that router bit set to that height for the entire time we build this whole project, because as you know, all of our bits are preset to the same height, and we'll show you how we do that later. All right, we've got that bit set to the correct height. What we're going to do now is bring our fence over, lock it into our pivot point. Then all we have to do is bring any old straight edge. Here's a straight edge right here. We're going to line that bearing on the middle of that bit up flush with our bearing. Lock the fence down. We're ready to start cutting our cope cuts. Okay, we've got our cope cutter set to the right height, and there's what we're going to make in this first to start with. We're going to cut the cope cuts on the ends of these two rails and on the ends of this middle stile. Now, there's different ways you can do this. I'll show you what I used to do, and I'll show you what I do now, so you can do either one. But what I used to do is take a push block on these long pieces, and that's not no problem. Come into here, clamp it, and make your cope cuts. And you're always putting the good side down, cutting your copes. Okay? When you get to the short pieces, it gets kind of dangerous putting your hand that close to the bit there. So we improvised and made a little jig, just notched out a piece of wood there, and that's going to take the place of my fingers. So you can see what I'm doing there is I'm coming down here, and I got a little bit of space underneath here so I can get some hold down. So I'll come into here like that, hold down, and cut my copes like that. Turn it around and cut like that. Okay? All right. Through much use of using this little jig, I've improvised. I found a different way. Okay? What we're done is we made a series, and if you're making a little project like this doll cradle, you don't want to make one. You probably make like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. So what I'm doing here is all the dimensions are included in our plans. And this middle section here is 2 5/8. So I cut a series of stock here with 2 5/8. All right. So what we're going to do, you can see we're getting 4 of them out of here, 4 here, and 4 here. So we're making 12 pieces really quick. Remember now, when you cut anything of any of our sets, you always put the good side down. So we're going to put the good side down on these, and we're going to cut the copes all at once. And very safely because we have larger pieces of stock. Now, to push these all through at once, we made a little jig. All you do is take a block of wood, a thick block of wood, cut a little rabbet in there on your table saw. You can see what I did. And then on the back, you want to screw a little backer to push those. So what I'm doing here now is pushing down on these, and I'm also pushing forward and pushing in. So I got all 3 ways I'm locking those boards in, and I'm going to make my cope cuts. So what we're going to do now is we're going to turn our router on, and we'll make these cope cuts. Okay, as you can see, we just cut a dozen cope cuts, just like that. Really nice and easy. Now, what we got to do next is turn this system around, bring it in here, and cut the cope cuts on the other end. Okay, we've got our dozen little middle stiles there all cut with the cope cuts. Now, the next thing we want to do is cut the cope cuts on our ends of our rails here. To do that, the instructions, the plans call you to make these pieces 10 5/8. Well, we've got 10 5/8. We've got 4 pieces here. So we're going to come down here, put the good side down, and we're going to cut the cope cuts just like this with our little push block, because this is a fairly large piece. Okay, you can see we have all the cope cuts cut on our rails and our stiles. And if you want to label them like this so you know exactly where everything's going, it really makes it easy. You don't get mixed up. All right, since we got the cope cuts cut, now the next thing we have to do is cut the pattern cuts on these. And instead of putting the pattern cutting bit in and trying to cut a pattern cut on a small narrow piece like that, it's going to be a lot easier to leave this in a large section like this, and we'll come into here, switch bits, and put the pattern cut, and we'll cut the pattern cut while it's on a big piece. After the pattern cut is cut, then we'll take it back to the table saw and simply rip it off 1 inch wide, and we're ready to go. Okay, we're going to stick the pattern cutting bit in. We're going to take our insert out, get rid of the cope cutter now, and stick the pattern cutting bit in. Remember how I said earlier all our bits are perfectly matched to the right height? You can see how the cope and the pattern just perfectly match. All right, so how they're perfectly matched, now what we're going to do is stick that pattern cutting bit into there, and it's going to be perfectly set. Now, you're not supposed to do that because everybody says when you put a router bit into a router, you're supposed to bring it up about 1/8 or 1/4. Why? Because when you tighten up that bit, the bit should have the capability of sucking down the collet to get tight. Well, in the bottom of our collet down here, we stick a little rubber grommet. So now when we tighten up that bit is going to compress against that rubber grommet the same every time, and we're in business, right like that. Okay, we're set to the right height. We're ready to start making our pattern cuts. All we have to do again is take our straight edge on that bearing. There's a bearing on the top. Our straight edge is lined up with that bearing, and we're ready to start cutting the pattern cuts on our rails. Okay, to do that, all we have to do is, the piece is big enough, is just use a push block and run it through on the bearing. Right there. You can see we've got the cope cut, and the pattern cut for this top piece, you might say. All we have to do now is take that on your table saw, set your fence for 1 inch, rip that off, and you have that piece made. And the other piece is here. And the other side, you would come back again and make the pattern cut on the second piece, rip it off, and so forth. So that's how easy it is to make those pieces. Now, what we have to do next is take the pattern cut on these small pieces, okay? We're doing it the same way, but running it through like that's kind of dangerous too. So an easy way to do this is to line all these up. We're going to cut a series of them all at once, okay? Let's just throw another one in here for extra measure. Now, again, we're going to use that same push block that we had. We're going to line it up here, and we're kind of far away from here. So what I like to do too is take a block like this as a hold down block. We'll bring that back and hook that back here. That way we're pressing down better closer to the bit. We're pressing forward here and pressing in here, and we'll make our cut like that. All right, we'll turn our router on now and show you how that's cut. Okay, there's our pattern cut on one side. Now, we have to cut the other side of this. Before, we're only cutting one side of this, but we're cutting two sides of this. So what we have to do now is take these off and rip that to 1 inch, bring it back and cut the other side. Okay, we just got back from our table saw and we cut all those middle sections into off of this piece here. Remember, we just cut 1 inch strips very carefully on the table saw to get these. Now, what we have to do is take this and cut the pattern cut on the other side. So we're going to set them next to our fence the correct way so we get the right side cut, and always remember to put the good side down when you cut these. And you can cut a series of these if you want. Now, remember that jig we had with the backer to push these through? Well, we're a little bit shy there, aren't we? So what we're going to do is just take a scrap piece, the same thickness, and lay it right into there, and that'll help us to lock those in. Now we can very safely make this cut with bit not even exposed and make a nice cut. Right there, you can see how safely we made a very intricate cut and very easily done. So we got enough for 2 cradles here. All right, what we've got done now, we've got the middle style done, and we've got the 2 rails done, the top rail and the bottom rail. And you can see how they lock together, right like this. Now, what we have to do next is make the 2 ends. And the 2 ends do not receive a cope cut. All they receive is a pattern cut. And I believe the dimensions call for that 4 inches. So we're going to go get a piece of stock 4 inches. Okay, the last piece we have to do to make this side, the frame for this side, is our 2 stiles on the ends. And they have to be 4 inches, like I said, and 1 inch wide. Okay, we got enough pieces right here to make 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 cradle, 2 cradle, 3 cradles. So what we'll do is we'll bring this down, put the good side down, run this through, and all we have to do is make a pattern cut on one side. No cope cuts at all. So we'll make a pattern cut right like this. Okay, do it on the other side. Now, I can bring this back to my table saw, rip this off to 1 inch on each side, take and cross cut them square so they're 4 inches long, and I have 2 cradles right there. And we might have to discard this small piece. But that's how easy it is to make your stiles. So I'm going to go back to the saw and cut these off and get them set. Okay, what we have done now is the stiles on the ends are cut. Okay. We've got that bottom rail cut to the right length. We can lock these in, right like that. Find the center of that middle on that bottom there, on that bottom rail, and put your middle stile in the center. And then we're going to put our top rail up here. Okay. Now, the next thing you have to do is find the size of the raised panel. Even though the size is in the dimensions in the instructions, it's a good idea to just measure it for sure, because everybody's ruler measures different and so forth. But what I always do, and when you put your raised panel in there now, when we make the big raised panels, remember we have to allow for expansion and contraction. Well, since these are so small, we're just going to make them about a 1/16 inch narrower than what we need. Okay, what do we need here? Well, the width of this panel would be going from right here, I'm going to put a black mark right there, the edge of that profile to the edge of that profile. That's how deep our grooves are on the inside. So all we have to do is measure from this point to that point, subtract a 1/16, and that's how wide your panel is. The length now, once you have this in the center, the same thing. You measure from the profile to the profile, subtract a 1/16 of an inch, cut your panel that long, and you're in business. You're ready to start raising your panels, which is what we're going to do next. We're going to take the cope cutter out, put the raised panel cutter in there, the mini raised panel cutter, and I'll show you how we can safely cut the raised panels on a small piece like this. Okay, we've got our panels cut to the correct size. Now all we have to do is change bits and put our panel cutter in. Again, our bent wrench goes on top, left hand pushes in on the spindle lock. And the beautiful thing about it, all you do is just drop that panel cutter in. It's already set to the right height for you, and you're ready to go. Now, we put our insert ring on, lock it in. We're at the right height there. We bring our fence, but before we bring our fence in, what we have to do, we have a bigger cutter here. So we're going to change and put a bigger zero clearance block into here. All we do is we're going to pivot this out of the way. That zero clearance comes out. This one here comes in. All right. Drops into our pivot. Again, take any straight edge. We're just using this square today. And we're going to bring that fence up there so it's flush with the bearing. All right, we're flush with the bearing. Lock that down. And we're ready to cut the panel cuts. Now, we're going to put the good side down on all of these, and we're going to cut them in a series like we did before. Always do the end grain first. Take our push block again. We're going to lock them all down. And since we're the push block, you can make a wider push block. If you want to make a series of push blocks, make a wider one where you come over here and hold better. But if you don't want to do that, you can come in here and use the same push block every time. Just make another one here to hold down, and we're ready to take and cut our panel. Now, we might want to slow the speed down because we have a little bit bigger cutter, and I'll show you next how we're going to make that. You can see how that panels are cut. Okay. Turn these around. Okay, you can see we have the end grain cut on our panels. Now all we would do is line them up this way and go with the grain. And again, we're going to use the same jig, right like this. We'll make our cuts on the sides, going with the grain. Okay, we've got our 4 raised panels cut. Now we're ready to insert those into our side stiles and rails. Okay, we're going to take those panels that we have, we're going to assemble one of our sides to see if they fit. There's our side. We're going to stick our panel in right here. Your middle stile goes in here. Then comes the next panel. Okay, then we can put our other stile right here. You want to dry fit these all together, make sure everything fits. Okay. And you can see our stiles, how it's coming down a little bit. That's for the expansion and contraction inside of our joint right there, just perfect. Now what you need to do next is take this side, both sides, put a little bit of dab of glue on each one of those cope cuts and the adjoining pattern cut, stick it in your clamps, and sand them off nice and smooth. Okay, we took our sides out of our clamps and we've sanded them nice and smooth. They're all ready to be put on our project. Now, the next thing we have to do is make some mini raised panels for our headboard and for our footboard. That's what we're going to do next. Okay, in making that headboard and that footboard, we're going to start with making the top rail and the bottom rail on each end. And you can see the bottom rail is labeled D here, and the bottom rail on the front and the back are identical. So cut those pieces out and label them. Now, our headboard is part A, so label that. We'll cut that piece out, and our footboard is back here. Now, you can see we have a 10-degree angle here, okay? So what we have to do with every one of these pieces is cut a 10-degree angle, right like this, okay? On the headboard and down here. It wouldn't hurt to even draw these on here, lines on here, and we'll take these now on the headboard and the footboard. We're going to go back to our miter sled and cut a 10-degree angle. When you cut it, don't injure this part right here. This is how long that top has to be, exactly. So start with that miter coming from that 10-degree angle, coming from that point down to here, wherever it ends up. Okay, we've got all those top rails and bottom rails cut at the 10-degree angles that are required. Next thing we have to do, you can see, we're going to cut the cope cuts on the ends of all these pieces. And notice that we've already installed our cope cutter back into our router, and you know how to do that very easily. You just take the other bit out, drop the other one in. That's a unique thing about our sets. If you want to make your 2 sections on the sides, get them all done, and then go to this, you can swap the bits back and forth very easily. That's the nice thing about our sets. Okay, so we've got the cope cutter in there. Remember what we're going to do. Put the good side down always, okay? And we're going to run them through. With that 10-degree angle, that requires a push block made at a 10-degree angle. So we're going to take our push block down and bring our stock into here, and that way we get a good, nice square cut and no chipping on the back. So let's make these cuts. Okay, we've got our cope cuts all done. Now the next thing we're going to do is we have to cut the pattern cut on the top rail, the 2 sides, and the bottom rail of both sections. We're going to start by cutting the pattern cut on the top. And to do that, first, what we have to do is identify that curve. And you can do that in the plans here. We have templates that you can cut out and make your own templates, but it's much easier with our templates already machined to the right size and everything to transfer the lines onto the two top rails. So we're going to show you how we do that next. Okay, we're ready to take and transfer the curves on the bottom sections of our rails, and we're going to use our template. And the template has a center point. What you do is find the center line of your top rails. And we're going to take that center point, line it up right like this. And once you got it lined up, we're going to take and drive 2 nails into the cope cuts. That way they're hidden. Now, we're going to take this back to our bandsaw it off within about 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch, and then we'll come back and flush trim it and get it perfect. Okay, we've cut that to within about 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch of that line. Now we're ready to take and put our template onto here and flush trim it. And remember when we nailed that template on, we nailed into the cope, okay? Now we have our flush trim bit into our router. We're going to flush trim that. Since the flush trim bit is not part of our set, we're going to have to adjust the height of that. So you can see I'm going to bring that bit down right into there so that my bearing is running on my template and my carbide's cutting the wood. All right. Now, we have a very small piece of wood now. Imagine this rail not being on here, and it's kind of touchy getting in here and cutting that. So that's why we took and on the bottom of our template screwed this block of wood. That makes it a little bit safer. Instead of trying to hold that little piece and cut this, we can come out here and it's a lot safer cutting a small piece like this, okay? We'll show you how it's going to be done now. We'll come into here. I just feel a lot better holding that piece of template like this rather than holding it with my hands, okay? So we're going to flush trim. You can see we got that rail to the exact same shape as that template. Now we're going to take it off, put it on our other rail, and do the same thing. Okay, we've got both of those flush trimmed now. Now what we got to do is make this pattern cut on the bottom of these rails onto our top rails here, okay? We put our we took our flush trim bit out and put our pattern cutting bit back in to do that, okay? And you can see it's too low, so we have to bring it up to the right height again. Now, an easy way to do that is to use this tongue portion. We're always putting the good side down, remember? And just move your bit up until that tongue portion lines up with the slot cutter on your pattern cutting bit. So we're going to tweak that right like that. We got it locked up. You can see where we're lined up right there. Okay, lock it in. We're ready to make that cut now. The pattern cut. And right there is the pattern cut on the bottom of that rail. Now we got to take our template off, put it onto here, and do the same thing there. Okay, we've got our 2 pattern cuts done right here and right here on our rails. Now, what we have to do is cut the pattern cut on the top of the bottom rail, and then we take our 2 E's that are labeled E's here, and we have to cut pattern cuts along those to fit into our cope cuts on each side. Okay? So you can see we've got our pattern cutting bit in our router set up ready to go to make some straight cuts. We'll make those straight cuts next. Okay, we're going to cut the top part of our bottom rails first. We're going to put 2 of them, stack them there next to each other, remember? Then we're going to take our jig and stick over the top to make those cuts. Okay, we've got our pattern cuts all cut on our sides and our bottoms, and we're going to put one together now. On the bottom rail now, what you want to do is just line this up a ways. We'll stick our top rail in. Now, you can see right now how we are not quite lined up right in here. See that point right there? I'm not quite fitting. So to get that to fit perfect, what I want to do is take and dry clamp this bottom piece and get it set just perfect first. Okay, in order to clamp this right here, what we have to do, we're all 10-degree angles here. I'm going to take and cut a 10-degree angle from this outside point up to here. Same thing on this side right here. So we're going to take that over to our saw and cut those 10-degree angles. That'll allow me to clamp it. Then I'm going to clamp that bottom section only. I'm going to not worry about the top. Okay, we're ready to start cutting the panel in the middle now. You cut the panel to the size it says, cut the 10-degree angles on it like we did earlier. Then we're going to take and apply the template number 4, center the template with here, and we're going to flush trim this off just like we did earlier on this piece here. Once you got that piece cut to the right size, we're going to test fit it. And you can see that it's a little bit too big. And if you look at step 18 in your instructions, says depending on your particular 10-degree setting, you may have to trim panel C to fit all joints tightly. So you can see we want about a 1/16 or 1/4 of an inch leeway all the way around. We're a little bit long. So what we're going to do is take this back and trim this off on the table saw. Okay, here it is. We trimmed it off. Now you can see our panel fits down in there, and we got a little bit of room for movement in there. Okay, next thing we're going to do is show you how we're going to raise the panel on this curved portion. Okay, we've got our panel cut to the right size. We put our panel cutter in. All we did is drop it in the same height as always. And we got our 10-degree push block to cut our 10-degree angles on our panel. Okay, so we're going to press down on the panel with a push block here and push with our 10-degree block here. Okay, you notice on that last cut, even though we weren't 10 degrees here, all I needed was a forward pressure here, and I was pushing in here against the bearing, and we made our cuts very easily. Now, the last thing we have to do is put that raised panel on the curve. And what we need to do is come into here, make contact with the bearing first to see where we're at, and then come in here and cut the curve. But we don't like our hands that close to the cutter, so what we're going to do is take a couple of pattern cuts. You can see them right here. We'll put one right into here, and we'll put the other one right in here. Lock them down nice and tight. Now, we're going to come across the top with another board, and we'll come in here and screw this board to these two end pieces. Okay, we've got our little jig put together here now, and we put a handle on here, push block, so we can control it better. Make sure you're back far enough here so you have room for to get on your bearing and make that panel cut. All right, so we'll make our panel cut using our little jig here. Okay, you can see how our little jig works here. It takes a while to make, but it saves in the long run. It makes it very easy to do. Now, we're ready to take our two panels now and insert them into our headboard and our footboard frames and clamp them up. Okay, our panel is cut. We're going to see if it fits into our frame here. Locks down here. We'll put our top rail on. Okay, we're going to lay it back and clamp that top rail too. Okay, you can see it fits, everything fits perfect right in there. The panel's right there. Okay, what we're going to do is put this now, we dry clamped it, we're going to take it apart, glue all the joints, clamp it up, let it dry, sand it, and then we'll bring it back and show you what we do next. Okay, we've got our headboard out of the clamps now, we've sanded it and everything. The next thing we want to do is get this bottom edge all straight. So we're going to take this against the fence on a table saw, set it for this distance, and we're going to cut this off so we're nice and square. Okay, we've got our bottom all squared up now. Now what we got to do is square up the two stiles. And how wide do we make them stiles? Well, let's set our center template on here, and we'll center that right there. Once it's centered, when we cut this off, we want this fall to come right in line and go straight down, continue straight down. Okay? And we've done that on the inside already. You can see where we've drawn the lines. Okay, what we're doing is we're centering this template onto here now. And we did it on the inside because what we're going to have to do now is we're going to have to tack this on here and nail it right here so we can flush trim that. But before we do that, let's make these cuts on our miter sled at a 10-degree angle so we got a good edges on the outside. Okay, we've got our 10-degree angles cut on our two stiles. Now the next thing we're going to do is take and find the center right here, attach our template with two nails, and then we'll take it on the bandsaw it close, and then we'll come back and flush trim it. Okay, we got it all bandsawed out there now, real close. We got our flush trim bit set in there now again, and it's set to the right height. We're going to flush trim this exactly the same shape as the template. Remember, when it Okay, we've got it flush trimmed now. The next thing we want to do is right on the edges here, you might want to sand that to get that transition going. You might do a little hand sanding to get that transition to fit perfect. Okay, the next thing you want to do is the same exact thing to your footboard. Again, by attaching the template on the inside and doing it the same way we did this. All right, so we've got the headboard and the footboard done, the two rails done, and we're ready to start assembling our cradle. But before we do that, what we want to do with all these pieces first is put a little radius on all the edges. So we'll show you how we do that next. We've got all our pieces here, our two sides and our headboard and footboard. We want to make sure that your headboard and footboard are exactly the same width and the same angle. So when you clamp this up, it comes together square. Okay. You can see we got our round over bit in now, and what we're going to do is we're going to round over the top edge of the sides on inside and the outside of both. On our headboard, we're going to take the outside and the inside, outside and the inside of the footboard. So we'll do this. We're going to do all the straight edges first. Okay, we've got everything radiused, and I radius the bottom. You don't have to radius the bottom if you don't want to. It's entirely up to you. You can leave that square if you want. But now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to move the fence back and do the radius on the curves. It's the same thing as a handheld rodder coming around here, except you're not holding the rodder, you're just moving the wood instead. So we'll just pivot our fence back out of the way, and when we get started, we're going to start where we've already been before and then ease into it like that. Okay, now what we're going to do is do some touch-up sanding on all our round-over edges, and now I'll show you how we're going to assemble our cradle. Okay, before we assemble our cradle here, our two sides are going to come into here and they're going to join at that 10-degree angle that we've been working with. So what we want to do with our two sides is come into here and cut a 10-degree angle on the bottom so that everything's flush on the bottom. Okay, we're ready to assemble our sides and our let's say our back headboard here. And we want to take our sides, and you can see I marked where they're going to go. I want them approximately centered in each side, see, so they're centered. To do that, you want to mark one, make a little jig here where you can space them exactly. We'll center this jig on your footboard. Now you can butt up against here and butt up against the other side, and you know you're going to be equidistant on each edge. The next thing you can do, you can see I marked some little holes right here for our dowels. When we're going to dowel this thing together from the back into the sides, and we want to make sure that these holes line up with our rails so our dowel goes into our two rails. So what we want to do is mark all that, lay it all out, and then the next thing we're going to do is come into here and we'll drill holes. This is a small 1/8" bit. It's all you need, right in the center. And you're going to want to do this on the headboard and the footboard, both. Okay, now we're going to come back and we're going to show you how we're going to dowel our unit together. Okay, we've installed our clamping guides here, and these clamping guides help us position our two sides so they're perfect, you know. And so you're not fighting this. What I did is I nailed these little clamping guides to my headboard and footboard down at the bottom, way down at the bottom where the floor is going to get rabbited in anyway. You pull the nails out and the nail holes will be rabbited anyway. So we've got those all secured. Okay, now we're ready to take and put our dowels in here, drill the holes for our dowels. And we're not using just your typical regular dowel. We're using a dowel, what's called a Miller dowel. And the Miller dowel is not all the same diameter. It's a big diameter, a medium diameter, and a small diameter. See, it's got 3 different diameters with some ridges here. And the bit is designed the same way. Small diameter, big diameter, and a bigger diameter yet. So what we do, and there's a little stop gauge. When you turn this drill on, you can see there's a place where to stop drilling. So what we're going to do is come into here and we're going to drill the holes on our top rails. Okay, we're going to back off on this clamp just a hair. Okay, now the key thing, you want to get the dust out of that hole, so take and tap the dust out of the hole. Now, the other thing, make sure you apply glue on the inside of this joint, on the joints, a little bit of glue in there too while you're doing it. Now, we're going to take the dowels, and these dowels come in different wood species. I'm making a cherry cradle here. I got some cherry pin dowels. You can get walnut dowels if you want to accentuate, make it different if you can. But once you got the dowels there, all you do then is just tap those dowels in. And that tapered hole makes that joint nice and tight. It's almost like a mini mortise and tenon, a round mortise and tenon. So we're going to turn that around and do the same thing on the footboard. Then we're going to move our clamps up here and do the same thing on the bottom. Okay, we got all those dowels all glued in there nice and tight. Now the next thing we're going to do is that we can take off these little guides in here now. And right in here you can see our cradle is pretty square. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is put our rabbet bit into our router. And we're going to rabbet out a bottom in here on the bottom to receive our bottom. And we'll just come in here and show you how we do that next. Okay, we're ready to cut the rabbet in the bottom. Here's our rabbet set. What I did is I took the bearing, the second one from the bottom is the one that I'm going to use. Okay, and I got that tightened on. We're going to put it down in our router. Okay, we got that thing set to the right height. Here's the floor of our cradle. We got just a little bit of carbide, so we're a little bit proud on that, a little bit deep. All right, we're set to the right height. Next thing we're going to do is come into here. We'll turn the router on, and we'll come in there and make our rabbet cut all the way around all four sides. Okay, you can see we've rabbeted out the back, round on the bottom. Now what we got to do, we have some radius corners there, so we'll just measure the width and the length, radius our corners, cut your floor out, your 1/4 inch plywood, and we'll attach that next. Okay. We got all of those Miller dowels sanded off nice and flush, and now the next thing, we got that floor cut also. So we're going to put our floor in here, and when you put the floor in, I'd put a little dab of glue in there, and then you can come around and nail it or pin nail it, and you got a neat looking floor. All right. Last thing we have to do now is put our rockers on, and we'll show you how we're going to do that next. Okay, we cut out for our little rockers on the bottom. This is the size we need, and we got our template here, and we screwed our template to a block of wood. It's going to come in handier when we start flush trimming that. But we're going to set that on top, and we're just going to trace it where it goes. Now, I'm going to take this back to my bandsaw, cut out to within about 1/4 inch, 1/8 of an inch of the line. Okay, we've got our rocker all cut out. All we're going to do now is take our template on the top there, and you want to nail this, nail on the inside. When it gets under your cradle, you'd be nailing so the holes will be to the inside. They won't show at all. Now you can see why we have this piece of wood screwed onto here. Otherwise we'd be down here flush trimming. Now we're up here safe, easier to flush trim. And always remember, when you flush trim, have that router bit, since it's a small diameter, going as fast as you can. Okay, you can notice when I was doing it, I was going fairly slow, so because you get some big chunks chipping off. If you go too fast, you're going to get into your good stock. So if you go nice and slow, you're going to get a nice, even job. All right. Next thing we're going to do after we take this template off now is we're going to take a roundover bit out of our roundover set, and we're going to round over all edges on both sides. All right, we used a 3/8 inch roundover bit out of our roundover set right there. We got it installed to the right height, so when we cut here and cut here, we got a good even radius. So now all we're going to do is come into here and round over both sides of our rockers. Okay, what you can do next is finish sand these rockers a little bit, then take your section K. What we're going to do then is line that up flush on the top and miller dowel that section in. That unit then we'll put the other cradle on top of this and connect it with the miller dowel in the middle. We'll do that next. Okay, you can see we got our miller dowel sanded off there. This is our rocker unit. Now we just take our cradle and we can center it on top of that unit right where we want it. Once we get it where we want, we glue it, put a couple of screws in there, and now we're ready to do some final finish sanding, staining, and finishing. As you can see, with our little junior set here, you can build numerous projects, and you're really going to have a lot of fun using it. I know I do. And the nice thing about it is it's really easy and safe to use, and the cost of making some of these projects is very minimal because even with exotic woods, you're not using that much stock. So when you start using this, I hope you have as much fun using our set as I did showing you.